Well, good morning, friends. I don't really know how to use words to give tribute to Phyllis Zimmerman. But when I look here this morning, I think the best tributes are all around us. The sunlight coming through the windows, the faces of all these wonderful singers that have come from all over to honor her. The beautiful service that we're having today, the clergy. Phyllis was, of course, in the business of music, and music speaks more than words can ever speak. If only I could somehow draw a golden cord around her life and make some sort of definitive statement, but that's impossible with a life like Phyllis's. Like any great teacher, her legacy now lives in you and I, in thousands of people she's touched. Every tile in the mosaic has its uniquely important position in the whole picture. And however great the gathering in the church today, greater still is what cannot be gathered. However significant the words we might say, more significant is what we cannot possibly say on this occasion. I can't give you the whole mosaic, but I can say something about my little tile. And in the light that reflects from that tile, you might see something that reminds you of your own. I didn't meet Phyllis at age 15, like so many of her students. I was much older, I was 35. I had, however, been a big fan of her work for many years before that. I regularly attended the Santa Barbara High School choral concerts for years, and I purchased their cassette tapes. And at the time, I was the sole proprietor of a little business, and frequently I would be working very late past midnight, preparing shutters to install in windows the following day. And during those times, my companions were the Santa Barbara Madrigals. And if you think that their music is transcendent when you're at a concert at 8 or 9 in the evening, you should listen to them at 2 a.m. I really can't put into words the comfort and the inspiration and the sheer delight I took in those recordings. And I bring this up because Phyllis always insisted on the importance of the recordings we were making as singers. She always said, we don't know who's listening to this music and where they are. And I knew that to be very true for myself. My first impression of Phyllis, when I think back to those concerts I went to, was of a woman with a no-nonsense attitude. And by no-nonsense, I mean just that. She didn't have any mind for anything less than the task at hand. How could I not respect someone who respects her work so much? Especially when that work involves quelling the scattered energies of 30 or more teenagers and inducing them to focus. There was a solidity about Phyllis that was reflected in the solidarity of her singers. Art was not a trifling matter. It was not a pastime or a matter for amusement. Music wasn't a club activity to occupy kids and keep them out of trouble. Music was an ultimate aim in life, a vehicle for expressing the highest aspirations and evoking the deepest feelings. And with that in mind, who would not respect the seriousness this woman brought to her work? But I met a different side of Phyllis in 1996 when I auditioned for Canterbury Choir. It was an August evening, and about 30 men had showed up for the auditions. Most of them, of course, were already in the choir, but Phyllis required everyone to audition every season. And she always held the men's and the women's auditions on different nights. The whole scene was delightfully informal. There were no tuxedos. There was no high-minded silence. The mood was casual and it was warm and fraternal. And the Phyllis I saw that night was relaxed, and she was very funny. And this was very clear above everything else, that she loved those men. I know I couldn't say that. But she did. She was like a mother and a tutor and a friend to all of these men she had a long history with. And she was also effortlessly adept at managing what was not a simple process, a mass audition. It was what I later came to appreciate about the rehearsals. She was always well prepared, and she always came with a definite agenda. Yet she could stay open to the inspiration of the moment. And an example of that openness are in fact the first words that she ever spoke to me. During that audition, she had played some sort of figure on the keyboard, and she was directing the men to my right, one by one, to sing the phrase. And just after the man next to me had finished his turn, Phyllis had apparently found out whatever it was she was testing for. We never knew. And she began to turn to something else, and my hand suddenly shot up in protest, a sort of juvenile, "Hey, what about me?" And to her credit, she saw it, she had a smile, and she said, "Oh, all right, can you do that?" And it was the kindest, most inviting, and yet most frightening moment I think I've ever had. Now you have to understand what it felt like. I had no Phyllis Zimmerman when I was 15 years old, growing up in Los Angeles. Not even close. And I was now 35 years old. I'd been attending her concerts for 7 or 8 years. I'd never spoken a word to her, let alone sung for her. But here suddenly I had the opportunity that I never dreamt would come at that point in my life. "Can you do that?" is what she asked. I didn't know. But I really wanted to try. I really wanted to join her music. I wanted to climb that climb. I wanted to contribute to that art. And I did get in the choir. And my relationship with Phyllis became a whole series of "Can you do that?" Yeah, in fact, today is one of those. Can you join the board? Can you serve as VP? Can you do announcements at concerts? Can you write advertising copy? The list goes on. I grew a lot as a person because of these responsibilities. And I tell this story because I think it illustrates that being a teacher was not simply an occupation for Phyllis. It was who she was. And accepting her challenges helped many of us unfold who we were meant to be. Let me give you 3 musical life lessons that I learned from Phyllis. First, what I call creative dissonance. Let's face it, Phyllis was not always sunny major thirds. Right? And of course, I'm not talking about her compositions. Phyllis could be tough. We all know. She did not suffer from what Oprah calls the disease to please. As a director, she had no difficulty expressing her displeasure. She used both the carrot and the stick, and her methods and attitudes were sometimes controversial. She had a temper. It got out of hand at times. But looking past that, a lot of us loved her, I think, because of her toughness. She combined the sensitivity of an artist with the force of an athletic coach. It's really a compliment when a coach speaks what Emerson called the rude truth. Phyllis was tough on us because she knew there was something more to us than our weakness. And it was part of her function to incite us to dig deeper within ourselves for deeper reserves, concern, and effort. If she had been the kind of world leader that just smiles and says everything sounds great, I don't think we'd be here today. And look at the burden of responsibility she carried. Every season, Phyllis would have to evaluate whether or not we were going to make it. It was always an ambitious program. What was the curve of our learning? What was the trajectory? Imagine if you were building a glider for 14 weeks and you wheeled it out to the edge of the cliff. And you wondered, was it airworthy? There's no point in having it mostly airworthy. In the event of a crash, it doesn't matter how many bolts and panels were screwed on correctly. Never was there a season when our work was easy coasting. Never was there a guarantee that we would make it. Phyllis often said that singing was above all, an act of faith. The second musical life lesson, I might say, is what I call creative rest. Phyllis would sometimes ask us, rhetorically, when looking at a passage in music, why did the composer use a rest there? Was it just because he couldn't think of anything else to write? Rests are not merely the absence of sound. And by analogy, I think Phyllis's very public professional life was sustained and it was counterbalanced by her introspective side, her contemplative practices. This was where her roots were, where she found renewal and vision. Her prayer life, poetry, books, artwork, and of course a few intimate friendships. Several of her songs hint at this, an affinity to the silence that was known, as she wrote, like a long line of rain. We might be apt to overlook this. By its very nature, a rest makes no sound. But that doesn't mean it's not there, or that its impact is not crucial. And lastly, the third musical life is finding a balance between confidence and humility. You'll hear soon the words to Simple Gifts, which we'll sing for you, a favorite of hers. There was a wonderful, I'm tempted to call it a ditty, a beautiful piece by Ephemelius called Beauty and Humility that she did sometimes. She was often speaking about humility and confidence. Every singer needs to find and release her voice. But at the same time, she needs to listen to others and to blend. So close are the two that they're like two sides of the same coin. You can't blend if you haven't found your voice. But you can't properly draw out your voice if you don't know the requirements of the music. I'd like you to hear the voices of just a few soloists here, as I'll call them. A few of the very elegant and heartfelt postings that have been on a Facebook site that fortunately was put up while Phyllis could still read the posts. Dr. Ellis Madrigal from Portland, Oregon, who's here today. Phyllis taught me about beauty, self-worth, love for myself and others, humility, discipline, patience, acceptance, and an appreciation for excellence, which, as all of us experience, is attainable by people of all ages and backgrounds. I just can't imagine what my life would have turned out like without her. All these beautiful gifts I will never be able to repay. And so I pass it on the best way I can to my friends, loved ones, and patients, so that they too can maybe just get one glimmer of the grandeur, the radiance, the sublime moments this woman has introduced into my life. This is from Kristen Ellsworth, alto extraordinaire. Standards, yes. She made us realize that the music we were singing would be here long after we were gone. It's been performed for hundreds of years and will continue to be performed for hundreds more. The music we perform deserved to be sung with respect and with every effort we could muster to make it beautiful, hopefully doing it justice. And if we could have our own transcendent moment that we could give to the audience, well, that's what makes it, I believe, a truly unique form of art. And finally, these words from Vivian Detbarn Slaughter. She's a professor of music at the University of Findlay in Ohio. You are and will always be that teacher, the one who gave us so much, who held up the highest standards, and inspired the musicians and non-musicians alike to consider themselves part of that larger world of art. You took us to Europe. You let us sing into the Grand Canyon. You gave us memories that will last forever. You gave me tools that I still draw upon with my college students today. You are cherished, and all of us are grateful to be lucky enough to share your love of music. If I had to sum up simply what I think Phyllis meant. I would simply say that she heard music that she found irresistible. She had the daring to follow what she heard. And she had the devotion to share that music with others. Thank you.